So bank deposit robbery is legal. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. In recent times, one of the issues I've been discussing on the channel is bank deposit bailing. To reprise the argument quickly, after the global financial crisis, the G20 group of countries took up the idea from several bankers to avoid another series of bank bailouts in a crisis. During the global financial crisis, a number of banks and other financial institutions were rescued using taxpayers' money. To avoid this happening again, bail-in was developed, where certain liabilities like bonds or even bank deposits could, in time of crisis, be converted to equity in a bank, thus stopping a bank failure without taxpayer help. After all, they argued, depositors are already unsecured creditors of the bank, so they should take the risk. Now, this has been rolled out across a number of countries, including New Zealand, where under the open banking resolution process, in time of crisis, bank deposits can be grabbed. In fact, the New Zealand example is the most transparent of all. But of course, in Australia, things, as often is the case, are less clear. With legislation brought in to enable APRA to facilitate a bail-in via the back door of any other instrument, this provides wriggle room, but allows the government and APRA at the same time to claim it could never happen here. Don't you believe it? And there have been several bail-in episodes around the world. Perhaps one of the most infamous was in Cyprus. And as Reuters reported, the European Court dismissed compensation claims in the Cyprus 2013 deposit grab. An EU court has rejected a petition for compensation by bank depositors whose funds were confiscated in Cyprus's financial crisis of 2013 in a process which would become a European template for banks in trouble. Depositors in two Cypriot banks lost billions when savings were confiscated to protect the island's banking system in 2013 in a process known as bail-in. The move was a condition sought by international creditors for a €10 billion or $11.62 billion bailout to the East Mediterranean island. The court concludes that the individuals and companies which initiated the actions have not succeeded in demonstrating an infringement of the right to property, of the principle of protection of legitimate expectations, or of the principle of equal treatment. The General Court of the European Union, a division which addresses complaints against EU institutions, said in a news release. The case was mounted by 51 people who lost funds and were clients of Laiki Bank, now defunct, and the Bank of Cyprus. While a long line of EU banks were rescued at huge public expense during the 2008-09 financial crisis, the EU excluded Cypriot banks damaged by their exposure to Greek government bonds from any aid. Instead, their clients paid. At Laiki Bank alone, about €3.4 billion in deposits were wiped out. This left savers with at least €100,000 a ceiling on deposit insurance under EU regulations. Bank of Cyprus clients saw a percentage of their deposits exceeding €100,000 converted to equity, exchanging the seized funds for shares in the lender. Under a completely revamped management, the bank has since staged a turnaround, attracted new investors, and is now listed in London. Both banks had in the past gambled on high-yielding Greek government bonds, which blasted holes in their balance sheets when Greece's debt was restructured under another EU IMF rescue in 2012. Now, as Andrew Henderson at Nomad Capital said, the European Union has decided, in its infinite wisdom, to rob the personal bank accounts of Cyprus citizens to pay for its bailout of the country. Cyprus got a rude awakening on Saturday that should serve as a lesson to us all. Specifically, account holders with €100,000 or more in their accounts will have 9.9% of their monies levied, while those with less than €100,000 will have 6.75% of their monies confiscated. It's all subject to a vote by the Cyprus Parliament, but I wouldn't bet against their likelihood to make nice with the EU and keep using the euro. Of course, the announcement was made in such a way to offer no warning and to prevent depositors from having access to their funds before banks reopened on Tuesday. No one can escape. He went on to say, "You and I know the Western world has turned into a giant stage for governments to perform their theatre. Without them, we wouldn't be safe, prosperous, or happy." So, predictably, the EU officials who have been pushing for this bail-in to save their own hides resorted to government speak to make it sound oh so reasonable. The finance minister of the Netherlands told reporters, as a contribution to the financial stability of Cyprus, it seems just to ask for a contribution of all deposit holders. Among greedy governments, favourite words are just and ask. They love to frame their dirty deeds as justice and their theft as asking. Except no one in Cyprus asked to have thousands of euros taken away from them, nor did they feel it was just. One pensioner said, "This is theft, pure and simple." A resident of Nicosia interviewed said, "This is stealing, I feel rage." Cypriots are understandably upset when Berlin is helping to wipe out their savings by imposing a tax the Russians to pay for the bank bailout plan. While an estimated 1/3 of Cyprus bank accounts are owned by Russians, presumably mobsters, the rest are controlled by normal, everyday Cypriots and small businesses. Of course, the government is here to save you by asking for you to hand over some money. After all, we wouldn't want to prop up the Russian mob. It's the same playbook that is used by bankrupt governments worldwide, including in the United States, where a laundry list of rules on banking reporting is designed to root out terrorism. After all, if you are able to use your own money freely, you might get bombarded by a guy in a cave. It's the same thing. Angry Cypriots are seeing firsthand how your money isn't safe if it's under the money-grubbing power of a Western free economy. They're taking it in the shorts as a consequence of believing their government, which speaks in platitudes about asking when they're really stealing. The EU has labelled their dipping into privately held bank accounts as an upfront, one-off stability levy. It's a nice way of reframing the exact dictionary definition of stealing: to take the property of another without right or permission. For years, American and European governments have been cracking down on cash transactions, suspicious deposits and offshore banking transactions. They want to know just where your money is so that when the time is right, they know right where to find it. If you have money stashed in another fragile EU country, I doubt you're sleeping too well tonight, he said. You may well be next, but don't think politicians in the United States aren't watching and learning from this, fork and knife in hand. You put your money in the bank to keep it safe, maybe even earn a pittance of interest, yet you never expect it to be seized thanks to no fault of your own. To your government, your fault in any matter is relative to it retaining its own power and continuing the charade of stability within its borders. Then said government will take, by hook or by crook, its unilateral, decided fair share. They'll tell you it's a one-off event, like the bureaucrats are proclaiming in Cyprus, but you know better. History shows that once they get the high of asking for a contribution from their own people, they're addicted. Most people buy into the charade. That's what keeps the party going, at least until it's too late. Cypriots learned that the hard way this weekend. The United States and the rest of Europe are teetering on the edge of bankruptcy and chomping at the bit to get their hands on what's not theirs. Call this a levy, a tax, a contribution, or just a fair share when they need to. The similarities are unmistakable. As Cyprus has shown, no one is safe. And so coming back to Australia, this is where we are at the moment. There is shonky legislation in play which gives APRA theoretical access to deposits if they were really needed. Now, the relationship between that and the $250,000 deposit insurance scheme is, frankly, extremely vague. You could assume, perhaps, that lower amounts will be protected. But again, that's an assumption because there's nothing written down and nobody quite knows. And once again, of course, what we need to do is we need to change the legislation, because if we have removed the any other instrument clause, that would go an awful long way to take the issue off the table. That was tried last year, of course, and the legislation failed to get through, although there is some quiet discussion going on about that even now. Now, the bottom line to me is this, that we have to assume that bank deposits are potentially at risk, not dramatically so, but are potentially at risk. And whilst we have seen in Australia in particular the fact that the Reserve Bank has been throwing really cheap money at the banks to prop them up, as it were, indirectly, and to support their performance and profitability indirectly, the bottom line is that if things really do get difficult ahead, particularly as interest rates rise, then the atmospherics could change and suddenly deposit bail-in could be back on the table again. And of course, by definition, it is not going to be something that's going to be announced, because by definition, if you were to start talking about deposit bail-in ahead of time, then everyone would run to the bank and pull their money out, just as they did in the UK through the global financial crisis. We all remember Northern Rock and their queues. So there are two observations finally here. Firstly, keep an eye on this. And secondly, it's worth continuing to push your parliamentarians about their attitude towards bail-in, because the current story in Australia is absolutely unclear. And I will remind you again that the point about this week's decision is that it confirms that stealing your deposits is actually legal. So the only way to get this changed is to change the law. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.